Hello fellow gamers and welcome back. Here is Captain Sidaris.
And here's Seven. Howdy folks.
Joining us today is skAven, not only a longtime player of Unreal Tournament 2004, but also the world champion in the category 1 vs 1.
Hello guys, hi Saturn, hi Sidaris, how are you guys doing?
Oh, having a little bit of a cold, but okay. How about you, Saturn?
Yeah, I think I'm mostly fine. Well fed. And you, skAven.
Yeah, I'm fine. Waiting for the questions to see if I'm still fine afterwards, but...
Well, let's dive directly into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Name is skAven. In real life, I'm 29. I have a degree in IT engineering, and I work as a software engineer. I got into UT very early in life, probably 8 years old, and that's it so far.
And how were you introduced to the franchise?
Actually, my older cousin played UT 99 with his dad back then, and when I went to their place, they showed me the game, and it was really awesome, so they lent it to me and my dad. So we started playing duels on LAN together. He was like the most terrible player ever, but it was fun nonetheless. Then 2K3 came out, I had the internet, and eventually I bought 2K4 as soon as it came out, and that's when it all started.
And got stuck there ever since.
Exactly. Even though I took somewhat of a 10 years break, I'd say. I was there when the game was mostly active, but I kind of followed what was going on in the community during all these years. So yeah, you could say that.
So you're currently active again, or is this 10-year streak going on right now?
I've been active like from times to time. Like you could have some events coming up, like every 2 years or something, and then I would start getting active a few weeks before that. So I'd start training for some tournaments, and so I'm not like always active. I'm mostly inactive, but I get active like from time to time. So like recently in 2020, I was active a little bit.
I can probably guess the answer, but what was your favorite Unreal Tournament game?
2K4 obviously, but honestly, UT1 was incredible, and even UT3 and UT4 were both very good, and probably that if I had played it just as much as 2K4, maybe the answer would be different, but yeah, of course 2K4.
And so it should be, it's also I guess for Saturn and for me the best one.
Well, I haven't had the chance to try UT3, so can't say anything about that, but yeah, I prefer it over 99 a bit. I never had the chance to play 2003 either. Totally skipped that one.
You didn't need much really. It's pretty much the same game. It has a few differences, but 2K4 is basically a better version of the 2K3. So
yes, I've been told, kind of a upgraded 2003. Nevertheless, I'd like to check it out at some point. Yeah, no, don't know if we are already in the history segment.
I would say let's move on there a little bit later. Now I would say it's time to answer firstly the question, what is Unreal 2004? Basically it's a classic fast-paced first-person shooter from the year 2004, and it's set in the future in which the universe decided to stop war by hosting deadly competition, how it should be I guess. In total there are 10 different competitions which vary between classic deathmatch and capture a flag to 32-player base versus base combat. The game offers of course a short single player experience, but the main focus is on the multiplayer side, which you can still experience alone with the help of some very smart bots. To play the game on Windows 10 you don't have to do much, just install the latest patch or use the GOG or Steam version. As usual, you can expect there's still an active community if we have the world champion in our stream, but maybe he can tell us a little bit about the community.
Maybe I'll speak about both the history and the community. I mean, I kind of prepared it, and I was about to talk about the history first. I think both go hand by hand, so it's hard to talk about both those topics separately. So at first, Epic Games originally developed Unreal, not Unreal Tournament, simply Unreal, and it had the whole universe with iconic families of characters, good textures for 99. And so they built a storyline around it, and what they realized is people mostly enjoyed was the mechanics, the fact that it was fast-paced, action-packed, That's the aspects of the game they liked the most. So what they wanted was killing monsters for hours, and they really didn't care much about the storyline. So Epic Games came up with the idea of a bonus pack for Unreal, where they would implement a deathmatch mode and eventually decided to release it as a game, of its own, that would be called Unreal Tournament. So this is how everything began. Then 2K3 came out, 2K4, and they had very innovative content like the assault mode that they were very proud of, and somehow disappeared in 2K3 and it came back in 2K4. Then they introduced vehicles with the onslaught mode. So it was pretty much to fit with the direction gaming was taking back then, with games like Halo, Battlefield, Star Wars Battlefront, Call of Duty, etc. They all had vehicles, like a mix of vehicles and combat fighting. So in terms of history, that's how it begins, basically. And 2K4, as we were saying previously, is like an upgrade of 2K3 with slightly different mechanics. Like the movement is not quite the same, and the weapon switching is a little bit slower, and the projectiles are faster, but it's basically based on the same engine. So for the history from developers' perspective, this is how it goes. And then I was thinking about like mixing the evolution of the community as part of the history of the game. So be talking about the players who paved the way for the next generations and all that. So I don't know if that's the concept, but you stop me.
No, just go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, basically legendary players paved the way for the next generations. Players who played all UT games from UT1 to 2K4, like Gitz, Log, Zolg, and even Fatality was around in 2K3. And then a lot of community content came along. Wormbo and Lotus made huge contributions. Those two guys are developers, because this game had literally everything. So you had Prag movie editors like Crystal, Electri, F51, mode developers, map developers, even like casters who had like a professional level at it, and so the whole community knew about them, and it was always them like casting the big matches, the big events. You had tournament organizers and all that, and back then you had those people. What made the strengths of UT, it was highly customizable in contrast to the current AAA games. So you had like Wormbo and Lotus, those two big developers back then who made huge contributions, like the competitive mutator. So in UT, mutators is pretty much what you would call an extension. So it's something that you can develop to adapt the game to your likes. Like it could be different weapon behaviors or different mechanics for the game. So you can basically do anything. The only limit is your imagination with it. So they made competitive HUDs. It's a mode called UT Comp, which allows for bright skins, heat sounds, everything that's required for a game to be played competitively at a high level. There was also an attempt to provide a more modern style client-based netcode. I'm saying an attempt because it was not entirely successful, but it was very good already for 2K4. Like considering that it gave us the possibility for Europeans to play against American players, which was nearly, if not completely impossible in the previous games like UT1 and 2K3, because the netcode was entirely server-based, and this client-based netcode was better on that aspect.
Better in the sense of having a better ping, or
exactly, it allowed players to play the game with like 120, 150 milliseconds. So on that aspect, it was very good. But obviously, you had shots that were unregistered and other stuff like that, which considerably modified how the game intended to be played. So this is why it's not flawless, but it was a good attempt actually. And then there was the presence of UT in major leagues at this point, both online and offline. You had the Giga Liga, ESWC, WCG. So these are the World Cyber Games, Electronic Sports World Cup. So the other games were Counter-Strike. So it was really standing next to all the other very, very big and popular games back then. And you also had those big international online competitions like the ESL clan base, which is now no more existent, unfortunately. But this is these were the golden years of UT, around 2004, 2005, even until 2006. And in terms of community back then, the Germans were completely dominating the game. They had a huge player base, at least in Europe. Also, they had a strategic location and also very good internet connection. So they had lower latency than other countries, but they were also excellent in LAN. But their lower latency allowed them to be very excellent in almost all competitions. And you had like all the legendary teams, professional teams that you see today in all major games like Mouse Sports, skAven, Fnatic, AAA, and many others. So yeah, at this point it was very very awesome. So I think some players even were sponsored. I don't think anyone had a salary, but at least they had the lands afforded and also hardware that were provided by these teams. So very great era. I don't know if you feel like if you want to interrupt me, do not hesitate to ask questions or anything. It's totally okay.
No, it's totally interesting.
So then at this point it was 2006, I think, and then around 2007 the game was kind of wearing off a little bit. Some coders in the community came along with what's called now Team Arena Master. So it was a mode that goes in the exact opposite direction of what the game is originally intended to be played. Like in UT, the point in comparison to, for example, Counter-Strike is that you just die and respawn over and over again. So there's literally no breaks, and this is what I thought made UT so popular. So, and all of a sudden you had this mode that came out, which was TAM, and which was pretty much the like recreating Counter-Strike, but with UT mechanics. You obviously know it. It was so popular. I for some reason it worked very well. Like you had those rounds, so it was a team against another, and the goal was to reach like 10 points. And when you die, you just wait for the round to finish. So that's the same principle. And I think what worked so well with it is that you had all weapons at each round start. And I think for the newbies who discovered the game, having to pick up weapons on the deathmatch map was sometimes difficult because all the top players are cycling weapons, so they prevent the lower skilled players to pick them up, and it could have been frustrating, I suppose. So this mode revived the game pretty much for at least a couple of years. And at the same time, you also had those parallel communities, skAven and CTF communities, were also very popular, even though I didn't quite know them because I was part, as you know, of the Duel and TDM communities. But that's basically when the next generation of beasts emerged. So you had players like Scream, Skillu, Daddy, Luxes, GoLink, Zed, and all that. So all these guys, they really inspired a whole generation of players. Like all of them had unique features. For example, Luxes was very well known for his headshots, and people had those memes about those players. Like they would spam binds of famous players' quotes. So it was very very fun back then. And at the same time, you had this website called unrealnorth.com, which was founded by the Scandinavian community. And it was a place where people from all over the world gathered, so you could discuss the latest news in the forums. And you even had like the trash talking, like they say in the Unreal Frag movie, based off this website. I mean, there's a movie actually, a frag movie that tells the story of this website. It gathers all the frags from this community. So it was very, very fun experience back then. You had replays of all the pros, articles about literally everything that was going on with the community. So all kinds of events, LAN, and like even gatherings. So you had people gathering for some events with photos and all that. So it was like a big family, sort of. The game at this point was not so big at all. I mean, I think it was sold more than 1 million times, but the active community involved in competitions was kind of small. So everyone knew everyone else. So at this point, the game was still popular until I think 2008, and then UT3 came out, and this is pretty much when the game stopped being competitive, I would say. Like all the major leagues, like ESL, Clanbase, let the game down a little bit for at least 2-3 years until people got bored of UT3 and came back to 2K4. And I would say that for the next 5-10 years, it's 2K4 with UT99. They both survived, kind of, as opposed to UT3, which I would say is completely dead at this point.
This would actually be a question of mine, because you say the game wasn't as popular in 2004. So did a lot of people migrate to UT3, or where did they go? Do you have any idea?
You mean the game stopped being popular at this point in 2008?
Yeah.
Okay.
When 3 was released.
Yeah, most of them migrated to UT3, and I think the guys who got disappointed in UT3 ended up coming back to UT2K4 like 1 year or 2 years later, when the game stopped being competitive as well, because 2K4 was competitive for at least 4 or 5 years, but UT3 maybe a year or two. There was this huge hype with this huge tournament with a lot of prize money that Hype No won, and it made him very, very famous for that. But afterwards, I feel like the game didn't last long at all, even though it was designed for controller players as well, as opposed to 2K4, which is only mouse and keyboard. But most of them just left 2K4 thinking that UT3 will be the next big thing, actually, which is completely understandable. And at the same time, I think Quake Live also came out, and as far as I can remember, top players from UT decided to try their chance at Quake. Like GoLink even got very good as well in Quake. Not as good as in UT, but in Quake he performed decently well at some point. So yeah, I think at this point most people had their fair share of UT at this point. So
yeah, it's kind of sad that there is no real successor right now out there. I mean, there's UT4 of course, but it's not being actively developed, from what I can gather.
Yeah, as far as I know, around I think 2015 or 2016, they decided to stop developing the game because of in regards to the huge success that Fortnite had at this point, which I can understand, right? So they completely abandoned the game, which was free to play, but it was going towards the good direction, I'd say, because like if you take modern battle royale games like Fortnite, for instance, I think Fortnite is free as well, so
Yeah.
they were adopting this model, and I mean the money could have been made of merch, right? And I think it could have worked, to be honest. Like if they had finished the game, polished it, made innovative modes and all that, it could have been popular. But because of that, I feel like UT4 was never as popular as 2K4 had been, at least in the very beginning. Even if right now, probably that UT4 is just as popular as 2K4.
Could very well be. I mean, from what I've seen, there's still an active player base right now. I mean, there are a lot of servers out there, and you will usually find a few that are populated. It's not like in some other games where there are still some servers around, but mostly they're empty. So I wouldn't say alive and kicking, but it's not dead either. So that's actually a good thing for a game that is far more than 10 years old.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, if you want right now to hop on the TAM server, like there's one running, I'm pretty sure, completely full, and it's very active. There is a Discord for it, and I think more than 500 people inside of it. So yeah, as you're saying, it's really incredible that like almost 20 years later, the game is still so popular. The one thing that is completely missing, in my opinion, is that Epic Games didn't release the source code of it in comparison to UT1, and it helped a lot, reviving the game. UT1 is quite popular, to be fair, for a game that is that was made in '99.
It's actually crazy. I had a look the other day, and they have going 500 players at a time
Yeah,
on
yeah,
all
yeah.
servers. I mean, just imagine 500 guys playing a game that is more than 20 years old. That's incredible.
And I think it wasn't even the case like a few years back. You know, it was like propelled so high. I think thanks to this code release, it gave the chance to people to fix the issues that the game had and
Yeah.
to make it feel new, right? But yeah, we'll dive into why UT2K4 is dying and is feeling a little bit old right now in comparison, for example, to UT1, which has pros, you know, that 2K4 doesn't have, even though 2K4 is newer. But yeah, in terms of history, it was funny, you know, to see, having seen the whole thing since the very beginning. It was funny to see the evolution of players' playstyle throughout the years. Like it's akin to what you'd see in art. Like painters adopt different styles throughout centuries. Like that's pretty much the same here. You see that players from replay that you'd see 15, 20 years ago, the playstyle are totally different. Now, better hardware allows much more M-based playstyles than ever, obviously. And it was interesting to see how they had to make up for this lack of accuracy that they had back then. But it wasn't their fault, you know. They probably didn't realize back then that having huge accuracy was so beneficial to competitive gaming. They didn't have the tools either. Like today, you have so many aim trainers, and I think the frag movies and all that probably helped, you know, with this aim domination. It's always crazy, you know, to see those incredible shots, and yeah, it motivates the youth, you know, to reach crazy standards in terms of aims.
Yeah.
Going a little bit back to the game development, what I also found very interesting is that it was so shortly released after UT 2003. It was just under a year that they showed a demo at E3 with playable content. It's again a strange business decision to cut basically the community in half and move them even into the direction of the new game. They had a refund system, if I remember correctly, that if you bought 2003, you will get a refund of, I think, 10 euros if you send the copy of the manual or the CD in the UK.
Yeah, that's right.
Very unique. I never heard about anything like that. Also, it's interesting that they planned in the beginning that UT 2003 and 4 will be cross-playable. That would have been amazing.
Indeed, but that would have been so hard to achieve, to be honest. I'm not sure how they could have managed it.
It was basically impossible because the code changes were so massive, especially in the net code, that they dropped that idea. But in general, having a game which is a progression, so you have basically like Call of Duty every year a new one, but it's still playable with the old versions together side by side, that would be nice.
Also, now that you talk about this topic, I remember that back then some players were reluctant to making the transition into 2K4 because when you're so used to have some kind of some mechanics and you love them and they get moved in the next edition, like obviously you're reluctant into moving to the new game. So 2K3 kind of survived and stole a part of the community that would have played 2K4 actually if 2K3 didn't exist in the first place. So that's indeed a very strange marketing move, and I would say that the absence of the assault mode in 2K3 was purely a marketing strategy, and maybe they had in mind that releasing 2K4 with it inside of it will like push people to buy the game and revive what they lived in UT99. Because I mean, if you watch videos about the story of UT, you'll see that the developers themselves, they're going to tell you that what they are most proud of is the assault mode. It was so unique back then, like no other arena FPS or FPS had done that before them.
And to be honest, it's kind of sad that we still don't have a lot of games, or I can't remember at the moment any new games who have a similar game mode. It's still a rare concept.
Or that number of modes.
Oh yeah, 10 different game modes, that's quite amazing.
It's amazing, but at the same time, it splits the community apart. And honestly, even when the game was the most active, some modes were not active at all. Maybe for offline players, it's probably very, very interesting, but online, like you would never see anyone play Mutant, for instance, even though it was fun, right? But you wouldn't see anyone play it. And probably that if these concepts came out today, maybe it would work very well. I don't know. It's hard to say, to be honest. But indeed, you had like even Last Man Standing, which was maybe the predecessor of battle royales, and back then it was very popular.
Yeah, it's an early incarnation of the concept, actually.
I would like to go back to the whole amount of maps and game modes this game has a little bit later. Now I would like to ask you a few questions about the competitive aspect again of this game. For example, how did you choose to go on that path? What was the main factor in your decision making to say, well, I will be a pro gamer?
Actually, it was by accident, I would say. I was playing a lot of free-for-all matches as a 10-year-old kid. I would just play and enjoy the game, like without being bothered by trying to get better or anything. But I was always competitive, and I remember that I would just randomly ask people in public servers to duel. I liked it for some reason, and I realized I was winning most of my games. And one day, I think I got destroyed by a French player, and back then he added me on MSN Messenger, and he gave me the password to a very, very popular server, which had like 50 or 60 spectators. And it was like the whole concept was like joining a community. I mean, I discovered a whole new world, like where people knew each other. So I started to meet people online and make acquaintances at this time. And I remember that you had 50 people watching two players all day long, and each time someone lost, he would go to spec, and someone would take his slot and take their chance against the winner. And the concept was so much fun, to be honest. So I immediately fell in love with this, and I got better and better. And it's the fact that I was seeing myself improve that kept me hooked to it. Like I felt that back then that I was probably the very best 12-year-old Unreal Tournament kid in the world. And I met this other guy who also was 12-year-old, whose name was Racket, and he was just as good as I was. And so we became both rivals and friends. Yet to this day, we're still real life very good friends, and we challenged each other every day and tried to get better. And yeah, it was very, very fun. And like by accident, we got actually very good, and we started winning competitions, being invited to the Eurocup, which was like the most prestigious online competition back then. So you had only 16 players in Europe who were invited to play it, and we were invited, both of us. And yeah, we were finally competing against all the players that we'd been admiring for so long, and that we thought we could never like beat one day. And then there we were, like playing against them and realizing that we were almost as good as them, if not just as good as them. So it was very satisfying. And yeah, it happened very fast, actually. It was like, it really became an obsession. Like we would play just too much, I would say.
The funny thing is, when you began telling us this aspect, thing I thought is, I believe you have broken a rule. You do not talk about Fight Club.
Yeah, pretty much. It was exactly like the Fight Club. But you had those small communities, those small fight clubs everywhere around in the world. Like I think at this point, the game was composed of many, many small communities, mostly country-based. And I would say even the websites organizing competitions were responsible for this. You had like national ladders on ESL, you had the French ladder, the German ladder. Of course, you had an international ladder, but people would mostly stick to their national ladder because most of us, we were very young. Our English was bad, and so it was like the easiest solution to stick around with people of the same nationality. And nowadays, it's the complete opposite. The game is so less active than it was that all the communities, all the countries, they merged together to form this small but very how do you say, like very, I don't know, I don't have the word for it, but people stick together now just as they did before, but now it's one unique small community with people from all around the world. Like even up until 2017, I think the European players and North American players, they would never stick together, and now we still manage to have like worldwide competitions happening in 2020 with the Quarantine Cup organized by the Rage Quit community. So we had those like impossible matchups happening with Russian players playing against the US. So it's like the recreation of the Cold War. Was kind of funny, you know.
Getting back at this so to say Fight Club aspect, that's actually an interesting move, so to say, because in my personal experience, there are a lot of games where it's really difficult for a new player to be successful in the sense of having fun. And what I find, and I don't mean this disrespectful or something like that, really good that the really good players are keeping by themselves. Because let's face it, when a pro gamer is entering a server and there are those casual guys like me, they will wipe the floor with us. And that's not really satisfying. And this points into a direction which today I believe is lacking. I mean, we have many matchmaking systems, and I believe there are none out there which are flawless. And it's kind of a healthy way, you know, not to step on each other's toes, still having a challenge, having fun at the game. And today you cannot really do this anymore. There are always very good players, and they kind of have to play with noobs like me. I mean, I would say I'm not a bad player in general when it comes to shooters, but I'm nowhere close to a professional player. And I think this is something that many games actually lack. That you can play with people which are of your level, or the other way around, that people see to it that you match in your level, so to say. I have this very often where you enter a server and most people are playing okay, and there comes this one guy and mops the floor with everyone. And I mean, this can be fun, of course, for the guy who's
Yeah.
rolling all over everyone, but it shows a certain respect to not do this. This I find particularly interesting.
That makes sense. Actually, and it's actually very true today that on old games like 2K4, which didn't have, as you said, a matchmaking system, it's impossible today to find someone your level. Back then, it was more possible than today. You had to make your own matchmaking. The community was big enough that you could find someone your level, no matter how bad or good you were. Honestly, I liked it more than the current matchmaking SBMM system. Like people today have to resort to ways like using VPNs, going to African countries, like if they want to have lower skill lobbies, right? I'm not a big fan of it, like especially for someone who's been like playing the game, trying hard to get extremely good. The game never gets easy for them because of the SBMM principle. You will always face someone who's your level. But actually, that's the approach that we had back then. When we got better, we try and play against people of higher level. Like we would stick around IRC, and you had this possibility like to look for someone your level. You'd be asking one-on-one, like mid-skill PME, and you have someone who'd be considered mid-skill who just ask you for duel. So it would work, like it was manual matchmaking, I'd say.
Yeah, and it takes a conscious effort, and I believe today this is totally gone. Most people won't do it, and to add on top of this, today it's not the case, but back then you had the UT stats. you could look people up.
That's right. Yeah, those stats were awesome. Actually, it's a shame they disappeared. Actually,
Yeah.
they are gone because there were a vulnerability on the stats website, and that's how Epic Games got hacked. I think in 2019. So they thought, okay, let's remove the entire thing. I mean,
Yeah.
the game is
Crash
dead.
it
And
altogether.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a pity because I run a UT server myself, UT 2004, and I always had the stats on, and people are really annoyed by me because they always complain, why do I have to put in some credentials here? And at some point you find out, well, for a few years this is actually pointless. And the feature itself, I believe, is really important because otherwise it is really difficult to see how good is a player actually. I mean, you have a rough estimate, of course, but you cannot really prove it, so to say. You have no idea what is going on actually. Is he playing bad on purpose, or is he just playing the way he plays? You have no idea.
Yeah, but I would say in that aspect, stats prove nothing either. Like you could create a whole new account and be faking and play like very bad like for a few days to have a lower elo rating.
I mean, I
So
assume smurfing was a problem back then too. So
mm,
that's just what people do at times.
yeah,
Sounds a little bit cheesy, of course, but actually, I'm really interested in this. As a one-on-one champion, what would you tell a player who is going to play UT 2004 how to improve their play? What are do's, what are don'ts? Important things that you think that a player should know when he begins this game in order to be successful at some point.
I'd say it first depends on where you start. But if you're a complete beginner, you wanna cover the basics, improve your movement. I'd say it's the key to success in all arena FPS, be it UT or Quake. Then you wanna build up a decent aim and be comfortable with all weapons. Like I remember that myself as a young player, I realized after being bashed by a much stronger player that he was switching weapons extremely fast. And back then I was switching my weapons with my scroll wheel on my mouse, so I wasn't able like to go from LG to shock in a second. So that's when I realized that I needed to bind all weapons on keys. And back then I was playing with roll keys, and you didn't have enough keys around that. That's when I forced myself to start playing with ZQSD or whatever letter that's depending on the layout of your keyboard, of course. But and you have to be conscious of those kind of details and adapt yourself. Like if you realize, okay, this I need to improve, how do I do it? And you find solutions all the time. And I would say you want to do a lot of TDM, FFA, or simple warm-up sessions, like the competitive mode UT Comp I was talking about. It allows for like infinite warm-up sessions with all weapons. It's extremely efficient to get better, to build a solid aim and a good movement. So good to begin with. And I would say depending on the mode you want to learn, but if it's, let's say, duel, you want to learn basic duel tactics. Like you start very, very basic, like, okay, what's the first step? It would be timing the 100 shield, which is the most important item. And then you start slowly adding more elements to it, slowly build up on that. I would say you should watch a lot of replays from top players, learn from them, and I would say to watch these videos, but with an active mindset. Like a beginner shouldn't be passively watching demos, because the idea is to constantly question yourself why this player is taking this particular decision right there and not something else. You should be taking note of the scenarios where you have no idea how to react. Like you are in a 1v1 and you every time you do something, like you get destroyed by your opponent. I remember that in my younger years, if my opponent was timing both shock and LG, it was very difficult to come back. And it is for everyone basically. Its kind of weapons in UT are so strong that when the opponent is timing them, it's very hard to get back into the game, and yet it is necessary. And when you understand there's always a solution, actually you find it in replays. Like I was watching so many replays of wins, the ESWC 2005 world champion. I would just watch him and be like, okay, right now he's in this situation that I hate the most, what is he doing to escape from it? And he would take decisions that I would try to copy and adopt myself into the game, and it worked eventually.
So from the point of someone who knows the game really well, are there any imbalanced items? For example, I get a lot of hate from some people when I use the translocator on captured flag maps. They're really not happy with that, but it's actually a game mechanic that is built in there for a purpose, and I'm really not sure if it is a cheese play or not. I don't know.
There are imbalances, of course, and this is one of the cons with UT. The fact that, in contrary to the newest AAA games, it is not being actively developed and upgraded. I've seen play sessions from the developers. They're not very good players. Obviously, the mechanics adopted by top players will be very different. The game won't look the same from a top player perspective and a beginner, of course. And I don't think, for instance, when they built the shock rifle, that it would be used the way it is being used right now. So they made it really overpowered, but they probably didn't mean it. But despite of it, there's always ways that you can find to adapt yourself to it. And I remember that I hated players for using minigun as a 12-year-old kid. I would just insult my opponents, saying, "Guys, you are lamers." It's like it was, and for a big part of the community, using minigun was forbidden. Like there was this consensus where people just wouldn't use it because it was considered like cheating, literally, in 2005, because pings were high, so it was difficult to hit back with shock or flak or anything. And if someone pulled out the minigun, it was an insta kill for this person. But then you start growing up and you start accepting that you have to deal with it. And this is when you realize that actually flak cannon is extremely effective against minigun if you don't miss your, provided that you don't miss your shots. So to answer your question, there are imbalances, but are things you can do about it all the time.
So, as a guy who has had a decent amount of success doesn't come without work, as you have already laid out. What amount of time do you think you have invested to get there?
As a teenage boy, I would say way too much.
If you had to put it in numbers, would it be, I don't know, half a year, 3 months, or something like that? What would you guess? How much time did you need to get where you are today?
I would say I was pretty good after maybe 3 or 4K hours. And in total, I probably have more than 10K hours. Like actually, many UT players. A lot of us have a huge number of gaming hours. But yeah, I wasn't playing so much in comparison to some others. It's the way I approached the game, I would say, which was different than some players playing like 20K hours. Actually, you could see in this stats website that some players had absolutely insane amount of hours. Like I think the guy who had played the most was on 30K hours or something. It's absolutely unbelievable.
That back then. I mean, today you might imagine, okay, it's doable, but it's also a question of how did he get this number in such short time, actually? Is the guy actually sleeping or something like that?
Pretty much. This guy probably didn't work, or he was just playing 10 hours a day. I have no idea. But yeah, and obviously, when I was as young as I was, I had to go to school, and my parents made sure that I still did well at school. So I could only play during the weekends, Tuesday nights, so every but of course every 3 times that I had, I'll try and play, so I'd play 4 hours on Tuesday nights and Friday nights and on weekends. So of course I would do my homework and still have a social life, but I'll try and put on maybe 6-7 hours a day. So in total, I would probably reach 20 hours a week. And then during school breaks, like 2 weeks of free time, I would play probably 8 hours a day for 2 weeks straight. And this is when I would make massive skill improvements. So it's not that much compared to some other players. So I made sure that I would give it all every second I played, like hard focus mode every time. and I remember that I'll be daydreaming about dual strategies at school. So I had this form of passive improvement 24/7. So it really was my passion from 2004 to 2007.
I guess it's called commitment.
Yeah. Then obviously in 2008 I stopped around here and I focused on my studies, and then I made brief appearances at a few occasions now and then for the past 10 years, but really I didn't play that much like the last decade. So
Do
usually
you miss
I won't be playing at all for 2-3 years, and there's a tournament, I'll practice a lot for 2-3 weeks and come back in good shape, win the tournament, and then be off again for 2-3 years, etc.
Do you miss that time, or is it like a closed chapter that is past and let past be past?
Of course, we and the whole community will like to be nostalgic about it. Like, we often talk about the good times and all that, but I would say it's a closed chapter, because I think you have to move on with life. There are so many good things to do, else in life than apart from gaming. So yeah, I would say that I almost didn't do any gaming at all, like for so many years now. Somehow try and keep in shape with UT. Not sure how. I think I played so much when I was a kid that I'm still able to get back on track very very quickly. But
It's
yeah,
like riding a bicycle, basically.
pretty much, yeah.
Well, gotta ask. I mean, as I said, I'm not even close to that level of play. Are the bots actually a challenge for you? Because they really wiped the floor with me when I set them to godlike. And how does it feel for you? Are they a challenge, or are they boring? Or are they wiping the floor with you as well?
No. After a certain point, UT bots get very easy for top players. Even like most players who have more than 1,000 or 2-3,000 of hours of experience. I mean, it depends how you play with the bots, right? Even today, with the skills that I have, if I go full close range against them, they're going to wipe my ass off, because they literally have an aimbot when it comes to flag cannon and all that. But the AI was not very developed back then, and if you stayed like a long distance from them, they were kind of easy to take down. So even when they're set to godlike level, they're not that good. But there's this mutator you may have heard of, which is called Vampires JR. It boosts boss skill level, and they instantly get flawless accuracy. They time items, so they actually become a very good dueler.
So it would be kind of a benchmark for a new player. If the godlike bots are still getting you down easily, then you still have a lot to learn.
Yeah. I would say so.
You mentioned you were starting out with UT 99. Did you ever look on the other side of the fence, tried some Quake or something?
Yeah, sure. Prior to 2K4, only UT1 and UT2K3, but then at the same time that I was playing 2K4, I tried Quake, Warsaw, and pretty much all the others Arena FPS, but I didn't stick to them so much. Maybe it was a mistake. I think back then I didn't have enough confidence to understand that it was possible to get very good, because Quake, honestly, Quake is amazing. It's a very good game too. And I had this idea that the people who had been there for 10 years already, they were unreachable. Like the guys like Cooler, and actually you have people like Rafa, who I think they tried Quake 3, but they got mostly active with Quake Live, and these guys still managed to become the best player in the world, like of all time on the Quake series. So maybe I could have been successful with Quake, but back then I loved UT. UT was still active. There still were competitions, and I didn't want to miss them. So considering that I didn't have that much time for gaming, I would just commit everything to UT back then.
Which actually makes sense. I mean, If you're good at something, you try to cultivate it, get even better. It makes totally sense. I can only imagine, because back then I wasn't active in any kind of community, that this pseudo beef that was between the Quake and the UT guys is actually totally nonsense, because for the most part, in my belief, it was, well, you are trying to get good at a game or you're used to the game. Doesn't necessarily mean the other game is bad in any way. You're just preferring the other one because you're used to it. This is why I don't understand why there are still people saying, well, I don't like Quake, or, well, I don't like UT. I mean, both games are a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, totally agree on that. People are gonna be people. That's all I want.
Yeah. It's sometimes so interesting to see how they create barriers between them actually for no real reason. I mean, it's a game. It's supposed to be fun, and if you're trying to alienate the other side for a game that's supposed to be fun, I mean, why?
And it's even worse with games that are not arena FPS, like CS or something. I remember that back then we used to make fun of CS players. Like the guys from arena FPS felt like the elite, kind of because of the different mechanics. But in reality, if you tried both types of games, they're both equally hard. Like I discovered games like CS:GO, like Rainbow Six Siege, and all that, and it takes different skills to get good in this. So even some guy who has thousands of experience in UT or Quake is not necessarily gonna be a good player in CS:GO or Rainbow Six Siege or anything like that.
Yeah.
Even Call of Duties, you know.
I mean, it's a little bit like evolution. You adapt yourself to the game. It's that simple, actually. And if the game is different, then your adaptation is different. And of course, the same adaptation will not work in another game.
Mhm.
And doesn't necessarily mean you are not able to adapt to the other game as well. But you can just switch over and imagine, well, I'm the champ there. But as you said, this evolution, so to say, that's happening, the playstyle as you described it, that's actually what makes the game hard. Because the other guys are improving as well, and they may have an advantage over you just because they played the game earlier than you, and you simply don't have the experience with the peculiarities of the specific game.
Mhm.
All right. I mean, I have no immediate questions. Only thing I would want to add to an earlier aspect, we said the game has a single player. Just for everyone who does not know the game, single player in this case does not mean a campaign. When I started the game back then, I was also expecting a campaign like Unreal or something like that, and the game actually doesn't do it in this fashion. It's totally centered on this arena style gameplay. So you fight bots, and that's a single player. Actually, you're doing pretty much the same as you would do in the multiplayer. You just do it against bots in a defined matchup.
That I would definitely mention at my con side of the game.
Yeah.
But before we go there, I would say I have one more question. You mentioned at the beginning of the video that there was a kind of broadcast system for the whole UT community. How was that back then? I can't really imagine. There wasn't any YouTube, no Twitch, nothing which comes close to any of those comfort platforms we have now.
Yeah, it was called UTV. It was pretty much like joining a regular server. You would have an IP, a port, and it was spanned all around IRC and the news website like unreal.com, and we just join it. And during the big events like Rocket Finals or stuff like that, you would have, like on Twitch or something, you would have 1,000 players spectating with this system. The difference is that all clients were interacting with this server, and the connections back then were not the way they are today. You could barely watch the game. Like, it was warping all around. You could only see what the score looked like, and you had the chat sections spamming around, just like what you would see on Twitch right now. So you could have a glimpse of the messages that were sent in real time, and if you try to react to it, like, the people wouldn't even see it. And obviously the players wouldn't see what's going on in this UTV section. But it was crazy, like people cheering for their favorite players on each action. Was really good times actually. And I think at this time back then, UT was even on television. Like those, I think at some point, if you look on YouTube, the Giga Liga, you'll find appearances of UT champions back then, like Killu or Zyme, playing on live German television.
That's really unbelievable that there was such a system back then, and it took so many years after it to have something similar.
I believe there was also something in the Half-Life realm, HLTV or something like that.
Yeah, but it was never in that scale.
I'm not sure, I haven't been there.
I remember it a little bit, but yeah, it was there, as you said, but very, very small. But I would say it's time to go to the pros and cons of this game. I would say our guest should be first. What would you like to say to the community? What are your pros?
I'll say the OST, the game soundtracks are actually very good. I'm sure you didn't expect me to start off with it, but I'll say especially the UT1 soundtracks. Some of them are really good actually. The composer is incredible. Like I remember, like just sticking in the menu, listening to the music of UT1, and basically 2K4 musics are remixes. But yeah, also the particularity and one of the pros of this game is you can have fun, even if you're a complete beginner. You will enjoy the brainless shooting. And on the other hand, the game is still very hard to master, and this is one of the cons, obviously. Another pros of the game is that it was heavily customizable, and this is not something that you would see today in AAA games. You had so much community-made content, maps, mutators, like the number of it that you can find is just astounding. And today you're completely dependent on the initial development team, right? And there you had people who were in the middle of the community, who had the best position to know what the community is waiting for. And there are so many knowledgeable people who can code, who can make maps so well. Some of them are just as good as the Epic Games developers. So this aspect is very, very, very good. Also, like in every game, you have a cheating problem. There has been people using hacks since the very beginning of the game, but it's not as bad as some of the games. One of the perks of playing a 20 years old game is that you like the community is so small that you know everyone, and when there's someone coming out of nowhere, you know that something's not right. And there are so many tools that allows you to track players, like CD keys, IP addresses, and all that. Everything is logged, and it's very easy to know if something is shady or not, depending on the history of the player. But some other aspects, I would say, of this cheating was also a pro, because the game was designed a way that some people were so creative with hacks that were not detrimental to other players' experience. Like some players would decide to write a redeemer projectile, and this kind of thing was funny. You know, it wasn't even a mutator, it was a guy able to tweak with the game engine, and it was insane. You know, everyone is like, oh, WTF. Was kind of funny. But of course you have those guys who try to DOS the server or stuff like that just to annoy people, and this of course is a problem, but it's something that exists in every game that I know. So there were some anti-cheats attempts in the past. I'm not sure they're still efficient to this day, but at least some effort was put into it. And when the game was active, it seemed to have been quite efficient. Also, the game has a few bugs. Some projectiles are unregistered. Also, the netcode is very bad. Like UT's netcode is one of the worst I've ever seen. I mean, for back then in 2004, it was really alright. But nowadays, when you've played other games, it's one of the big downsides of it, of course. And whether it is the enhanced version of it or the original one. It feels good only if you have a very, very low ping. Also, mouse input is very average when it comes to the cons of the game. You have a noticeable input lag, and your crosshair is somewhat inaccurate. That is mainly due to the fact they use direct input rather than raw input, and that's something that is not even a problem in UT99. And this I don't understand why they took this direction. Like in UT1, you can have raw input, as far as I know, but you cannot do it in 2K4.
Yeah, it's a regression actually.
Yeah, honestly, the game would be incredible if it had a raw input. Like you would have literally a named trainer. UT would be a named trainer, like Team Arena Master. I know for a fact that some people use it to train their aim. It's very efficient for it. So because of that, the fact that the mouse is not accurate, it kills the experience in that aspect a little bit. But yeah, I'd say that's it. I was going to slip into the unique features, which are pros and cons, but I think the question is coming afterwards.
Yeah, sure, it will be. But before we go to Saturn's pros and cons, a technical question here. I heard sometimes during this talk the word netcode, especially that it's bad. As a noob, I don't have the feeling it's really bad. I played so many different shooters in the past 20 years. I can't see really a big difference to the games we have now and back then. Maybe it's just my observation. Saturn, you're more the technical guy on this show.
No, I would have actually asked the very same question, because in my experience it's similar, but maybe I just know of games which have a really terrible netcode. I never really noticed it with UT 2004, but maybe you can point it out a little bit more, skAven, because maybe it's something that a new player like me will simply not notice. I'm not sure.
Yeah, for instance, like I'm sure you guys probably have an awesome internet connection. So when you have low latency, somewhat under 30 or 40 milliseconds, honestly, it's all right. But I feel like the game, once you reach like the 50s or 60s, it gets very hard to play, and the difference in accuracy gets significant. Like in my experience, I had 60 milliseconds in home servers in France for a few years when I started playing competitively, and honestly, it was a problem. It had an impact on my performance. So I couldn't compete with the top guys who had 12, 16 milliseconds. And the day that my internet connection improved, I think my accuracy, especially for tracking weapons like minigun, lingun, it exploded. Like I had like plus 15, 20% accuracy stats. And when it comes to even hit scan weapons, shock, LG, it was like instantly plus 10, yeah, at least 10%. At a high level of play, it really makes a difference. It's the difference can be very, very huge. So I had to adapt myself to it, to try and play excessively defensively. And yet I was able to play aggressive, but I couldn't. I remember like restricting myself to using only the weapons that I could use. Like sometimes I wouldn't use the most efficient weapon, and I was labeled as shockingly by some people back then. But that's basically like the only weapon that I could remain efficient with, even at high latency.
No, I have a good excuse when I'm playing on internet servers. No, seriously. Actually, something I noticed on servers that I don't seem to pull off anything, but may just be me, of course. But then again, ping off 30 or something, I believe I have this rarely.
Yeah, 30, 40. I mean, it's honestly it's okay. It's okay. It's playable.
Okay.
But when you're duel against someone who has like the third of your ping, you're trying to shoot like from hard angles, and the guy is like he only shows like 1 pixel of his head, like 60 milliseconds. Sometimes it's a bit too late, to hit the crucial shot. So.
But do you think newer games have this improved, so there is not that problem any longer? Or it's better at least?
It's not perfect. It just works differently. Back then, it was entirely server-side based. I'll try to explain it. But the player's position was calculated server-side, and all your actions were delayed by your ping. And now the netcode works a different way. Now it's client-side. So, like if you see someone on your screen and you hit him, your computer will send to the server the information that, okay, at this point I shot this guy, he was there on my screen, so I hit him, and the server will say, okay, you hit him, so I agree, it's okay, you get the damage. And so for someone having like 150 ping, like it feels like for him like it doesn't have latency. But of course it creates problems. Like for instance, someone like me who now has a perfect connection, I will be picking around a corner. I will shoot, and then I will come back and hide behind that corner. But when the guy in front of me has 150 milliseconds of latency, you will see me 150 milliseconds too late, you know? So when I'm supposed to be hiding behind a corner, he sees me in plain sight, he hits me, and the game says I'm dead. So this is how it works with current netcode, and no netcode is perfect, no mechanism is perfect.
It goes the other way around as well. The older games had a similar problem, just the other way around. It's just a technical limitation. There's nothing you can actually do about it. What is true, what the server sees or what the client sees, you can set a definition, but actually both sides are right and both sides are wrong.
Yeah, but they still made technical improvements throughout the years, of course, like in terms of networking, and they implemented better algorithms, making it more fair than it was 15 years ago.
Sure, and also we have really much better internet today.
Yeah.
But now I would say it's time for you, Saturn. Tell us your pros and cons.
Well, maybe I'll start with the history in my case, because back then when the game came out, my computer wasn't even close to being able to run this thing. On my Pentium 3, it was simply not doable. I had a 64 megabyte TNT2, and you could forget about it. And so I actually never played it until early summer of 2006. I went to a LAN party and I borrowed a laptop from a good friend of mine, and this was a lot more potent machine than my my own computer. And this was when I played the first time UT 2004, and I was just blown away by the graphics back then. I mean, it was 2006. I was playing map, I believe Antalus, and I was really blown away by the grass. I mean, I had played Elite Force for quite some time, and it never had any textures like that. And when I look today at the grass, I think, well, it's okay. But back then, I was really blown away from the quality of the game. And this was my very first impression. And as I said, today you may look at it and think, well, okay, it's a game that's old. But then again, for a game that old, I believe it still looks nice. For me, this is a pro. There are a lot of games which kind of aged in a bad way. For example, if I look at UT 99, I really see that the game is 5 years older. I mean, it's not a problem for the fun aspect. I still like to play UT 99, but when I look at it, it really looks old. And UT 2004, I believe, covers this up a little bit more. But that's just an emotional response. I mean, someone else might beg to differ entirely. Funny thing is, as some people know, I use Linux, and you can play UT on Linux natively. This was also a big pro for me. Didn't have to switch to Windows to run a nice game. But even then, under Windows today, it still runs well too. I mean, there are a lot of games which are not as old but run a lot worse. So Epic did something really good with that. And yeah, as I said, the many modes. It's also something that I find important. I mean, there are a lot of games out there which are rather limited in their modes, and of course it helps to glue the community together. You know what you have to expect and stuff like that. But then again, after a while, at least for me, it is like that. It gets kind of boring. For example, playing deathmatch up and down, back and forth. Yeah, you can do this for 2 hours, but after a while, it gets uninteresting, I believe. And throwing in a little bombing run or something like that, or double domination, really spices up the experience, in my opinion. And it's, so to say, a game where everybody can find the mode he wants. This is something I find important. And as skAven already said, the music. I still like certain tracks very much. I mean, the track from Hyperblast, I still love that tune. It's really nice. And from a practical point of view, the master servers are still up. There are a lot of games where this isn't true anymore. Today you fire up your UT installation, look up a new internet server via the master servers and pick one and off you go. This is probably one of the reasons why the community still has so many players. As I said, another game may have a real problem with that because master servers are down. And it shows also because there are a lot of servers on. Can be a con, of course, if you say, well, it splits the community, but you are still able to play the game without much effort. You don't have to pull weights or something like that. It just works. So if you're just a casual gamer and want to immerse yourself in the game and just give it a shot, it will work nicely for the most part. There are a few cons which I will get in a moment. And last not least, you can train with the bots. Today there are games which don't really have bots or where you cannot train yourself as a noob against bots. And those bots for a noob, I believe, are just nice because they range from totally stupid to challenging. And I mean really challenging, as I said. Mop the floor with myself. But you can adjust them. You can pick a level that is suitable for yourself so that it is still fun, or you can go beyond that and actually train in a competitive mode so that you're not a target practice for everyone when you go on a public server. So those are basically my pros. And of course there's also downsides from my point of view. It sounds a little bit silly, but yeah, hard bots. I still haven't mastered them, but from what I've heard, they are not that bad. Technically, I said the game works rather well. There's one thing that really bugs me. If you know what to do, it's easy. This damn firewall request. When you install, for example, the GOG version of the game, you run it and the first thing it says to you, well, your firewall is blocking me, which is totally untrue. You're already having it unblocked or something like that and it still claims, well, your firewall is blocking me. It's just bullshit. And if you know where to look in your configuration files, then you can turn this off and it works just nice. But for a novice player which has no idea what he's doing, this is a bummer, I believe. And something that's kind of bad, I believe, is the native resolutions are actually supported, like HD or 4K, but you will have to set it up in the configuration file. The graphical user interface doesn't show you all the available resolutions. This, for example, would be a small, I believe, minor fix for the game that would really do the game justice because the game actually is able to do it. It just doesn't present it to you. Oh yeah, and something that was especially funny back then, when I bought the game a few years later after that LAN party, I bought the Unreal Anthology. And boy, is this installer slow. I don't know if it was the same with the original standalone CD where you have only UT 2004 on it, but I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say it was installing for 20 minutes and actually it was just copying, I believe, 3 gigabytes or something from a DVD, and it shouldn't take you that long. It really took forever.
You're not exaggerating.
Minor thing, I believe the captain will agree on that. Why did they have to put the score screen on another key than tab? I believe everybody who got really used to showing the scoreboard with tab was really confused because the game does something completely different at that point. And it's puzzling for me. It's not a really big problem, but yeah, the question is why? Why? Why did you do it?
We should find that guy and torture him. It's unbelievable.
And something that might actually be a question for our guest, I'm not sure if it's just me, I believe the captain also has noticed that strange mouse behavior, because at least in my observation, the mouse speed does seem to vary. It's not always the same speed, and it could even vary in the same match.
Yep.
So you move your mouse and it somehow doesn't move the same pace as it did a moment before. Is this something I'm imagining or is this a real problem?
So many people feel it too, so I assume it's probably real. I've been trying so hard to pinpoint what's going on about this. If you have, for example, your mouse set on 1600 dpi and try to zoom in at maximum level with the lightning gun, and you try to move your mouse as slowly as possible, you realize it's not moving at all.
Yeah.
And if you lower your DPI, like 400, and you start getting pixel skipping, but then it works just fine. Like you don't have this mouse acceleration feeling. And I believe that their implementation of the mouse inputs was poorly made because very recently, There was UTComp 1.8, which was released and coded by DAOD, and I had a look at the commits on GitHub. He said he did some improvements about mouse accuracy, and I saw the code, and actually the original algorithm was very, very bad. Like, he made some obvious changes that made it so much better, and now this problem when you're playing with the latest version of UTComp is almost gone, right? So the mouse feels so much better for some reason. And if you try this experience of sniping at maximum level, and even if you move your mouse slowly, no matter how high or low your DPI is, it's going to respond accordingly.
And something you already said, I noticed too, especially when you use the lightning gun, that it doesn't fire where you point to. At the beginning, I was only thinking, well, maybe it's me, but if you really look carefully, it doesn't fire somewhere else. That's strange. Yeah, the stats are gone. I believe I already said that it's a pity, actually. I would love to see how well I'm doing, because I have no idea. Which brings me to the other side. I have this problem with other games too, but in UT it quite literally hits me really hard. When I go on public servers, it's mostly a rape fest. I don't know if I'm that bad. As I said, usually I would say somewhere around medium, slightly below medium, and when I go there, I'm just toast. I don't know if it's some cheaters that are taking advantage of me, or just a lot of veterans that I'm not sure. And this is why I said I find it so honorable, so to say, that the good styles were sticking together and playing each other's, well, because this is the other way around. It's not fun. I mean, I like the game, I really do, but going on public servers, it's not fun for me.
Yeah, but if I can add something about it, there's nothing to be ashamed of about this. In 2021, almost everyone is a veteran on this game and has thousands of hours of XP, so it can be overwhelming for someone who's a beginner or an average player. And it makes me think that when you asked what I would tell a novice player on improving play would be to never ever get discouraged. You know, whatever game you're playing, actually. Like,
yeah, tenacity.
Exactly. And also, like, I see too many players today still blaming the game or bad luck or finding excuses when they're getting killed. And honestly, I would say that you shouldn't get mad or anything, and you should try to visualize what you did wrong. And just remember that the purpose of a game is still to have fun, right?
Yeah, and this is why this is a con for me, because if I'm just playing casual, thinking, well, let's have a little fun here, this isn't exactly my feeling. But what's so interesting about it for me is you say totally accurately, actually analyze what you're doing there. And I don't really get the chance, actually. I'm fragged that often, and you think, well, I could just simply do nothing, it would have a very similar outcome. This is what's so frustrating about it. You're barely making a hit. And something that's specifically bad is the laws in Germany, because in Germany the game is on the so-called index, which means you are not allowed to advertise the game. You are technically allowed to sell it. Nothing wrong with that. You can play it, everything is fine, but you are not allowed to advertise it, which leads to the problem that Steam and GOG are not advertising it. You can't even search for it, so you are not going to get the game.
Okay, I didn't know that. Actually,
it's kind of crazy. Back then, when the game was released, they put it on this index list, and I also read up the earliest the publisher can challenge that decision is after 10 years, which would have been 2014. But let's face it, after 14 years, the publisher won't do anything. So basically, the game is, so to say, gone. And when you consider what, for example, titles like Doom today do, and you compare it with UT 2004, you wonder, well, this game is still forbidden.
Yeah,
I don't get it. I mean, it's a very conservative approach to begin with, but the bad part is actually you cannot buy the game, at least not on a conventional way. I mean, I could go to the captain to Austria and buy it from there, because geolocation won't matter here, but it's a real limitation here. Yeah, and I believe that's about it.
Well, then I just quickly finish this one off. I also think that the biggest pro from me is that it's so easy to learn, but really hard to master. The gameplay is so inviting, so simple. You just have fun from the first minute. And as you mentioned, Saturn, the AI is so scalable, so you can really move one step after another up to the, not to the pro level of course, but to being better. And that in a combination of 95 maps in the GOG version, the latest build basically of the game, it's amazing. It's not even amazing, I would say it's crazy.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember any game in my head, in my experience, which released even close to that amount. And I also have to concur that this game aged very, very well. You still can play it on a LAN party and have fun for hours, no problem.
Also, as Saturn said, the graphics are still very impressive for a game this old. I totally agree on that. And I forgot to add this to my pros as well. Even the games of today, even if they look incredible, if you want to run them properly on your PC, you have to lower the quality, and in the end it looks even worse than UT for some reason.
The graphics are a little bit a mixed bag for me. I like them, I really like them, but if you're going a little bit more in the modding side of the game, I sometimes have the feeling that they are strange. They are only fitting for exactly the art style of UT. If you move away from that, for example, into the direction of Counter-Strike or even Doom or Star Wars mod, whatever, it doesn't look good. I can't really point my finger at the problem I have, but it's really odd.
Yeah, I think I get it. Like yeah, for RPG invasion modes and all that. Also, you have to bear in mind that the monsters, vehicles, and all that, the modes you're talking about, they're community created, and I believe probably these guys didn't put as much hours as the original developers did, and this could be an explanation as why it doesn't look as good as the original textures.
No, you misunderstood me maybe. Of course, if you put more hours into a project, it looks better. But you maybe know that feeling that certain game engines can do certain genres, certain eras better. And I think the UT engine is very limited to that kind of sci-fi look.
Okay, yeah.
That fast sci-fi look. Not Star Trek, for example, or Star Wars. There it falls apart a little bit. I can't really put my fingers where it is, but it's strange. What neither of you mentioned is the missing of a good tutorial for me as a con. There is the single player, which introduces a lot of the game, but for, let me count, for nearly 15 years I have this game. I just recently learned that there is an invasion mode in this game. So the game never told me that there are different modes beside the assault, the classic stuff basically you play all day, all night. And I think this is a real fail, especially if it's not even mentioned in the handbook that much. So they could have done there a lot more.
That's very true actually.
And what Saturn mentioned also a little bit, it's not that noob friendly. On the one side you have a game which doesn't explain which content you can play, but it also slaps you in the face during the tutorial that there are hidden combos. It's okay that you have hidden stuff in it, but if it's stuff which could mean that you lose every time a match, it's not good for a new player.
I mean, in a way that's part of the fact that the game has so many mechanics. For example, if you don't know in Onslaught mode that you can use the link gun to build up your node faster, this is a real disadvantage because the other side will do it and you won't do it. And yeah, if you don't know it, if it isn't properly told to you, I'm not sure if the single player actually touches that, but there are a lot of such mechanics. For example, knowing that you can blow up the shock ball of the shock rifle when shooting on it. You got to know it to have this idea. You will probably only find out by accident if you're not being told. It's not like the game points you into this direction.
The game tells you in the first or second tutorial mission that there are combos. It gives you the first combo for speed, and then tells you, yeah, find out the other ones. Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, then that's it also for my cons and pros. I would say You already hinted that you have a few ideas. Why is this game unique?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that the game has unique movement mechanics, like the double jump, dot jump. This was revolutionary, I would say, for 2004. It allows for an infinite amount of combinations, and you can move so fast. And when you want to push into an opponent, it gives you the possibility to do so many nice trick shots like shotgun jumps and all that. It's all those kind of things that you couldn't do in UT99, for instance. You could of course do a shield jump, but like you couldn't do it while chasing someone and in style and all that. Like now you have the possibility to do a shield jump to go faster, and then in midair you can switch and hit someone with an LG. Like it allows for so many good combinations to do highlights for a frag movie, for instance. And yeah, it's just moving around in this game is very fun actually. I would say also the existence of the shield gun. It's very unique in the sense that I don't think I've seen any other FPS using that. Of course, you have the usual war games like Call of Duties and all that, which include a shield, but like having something like this, which allows such versatility, the capacity to run away in an arena FPS, in that aspect, it's so different from Quake that I would say it's a strength. Like personally, I like it a lot. In any case, the shield gun doesn't make anyone indifferent. Some people hate it, some others love it. Some would say that because of that, you don't pay for your mistakes when you're doing a team deathmatch or duo or anything. It allows you to do clean games, like you can beat someone XX to 0 basically because of the shield gun. Like every time a weaker player has the upper hand, I can just decide to flee away with your shield gun raised and stack back up and then go back into the fight, and then you're sure you're just never going down. And that's a mechanic that doesn't exist as far as I know in other games. Also, the existence of two fire modes is very nice. It comes and complete the special movement mechanics. Like it allows for so many combinations. The fact that you can blast shock cores, make combos, and the fact that you can at the same time with the same weapon like the flag cannon be able to use it as a shotgun in close range situation or just spam shells to some places that are not accessible. And that makes the game so unique. Like in Quake, for instance, you have two separate weapons for that usage. You'd have to pick the grenade launcher, right? If you want to spam to some places that are out of reach. And actually, in a Diabotical, the most recent arena FPS that came out, which implements both Quake and UT mechanics. When the game first came out, it came out with a grenade launcher, and eventually they started incorporating this mechanism. So I would say it shows how much this feature is appreciated in the gaming community. Like now you can have a rocket launcher firing grenades as a second fire mode, and the shock rifle itself is also very unique to the FPS world, and I like that a lot. The fact that it allows you to use the shock primary to do a decent amount of damage, and at the same time to have the possibility to make it probably the most powerful weapon of the game with combos. So its damage range is goes up from 45 HPs to something like 300, which is crazy. There's not many weapons that can display such possibilities. So yeah, I would say in that regard, the game is kind of unique.
Saturn, you want to join in?
Difficult to say, because a lot in the game was actually, at least in part, present. I mean, UT99 already had those double left, double back, double forth combos. They didn't have the combination with the jumping, they didn't have the double jump. So this is what was really new for 2004. Yeah, a lot of things I believe are kind of a combination. If I look at, for example, Elite Force, they also have a mechanic where you can shoot around corners. If you take the Tetrian machine gun, there are two modes. You can either use it as a machine gun, or you can use it to shoot bouncing bullets, which can go around corners. So there's also this variation. This is why I'm saying it's difficult to say unique, I mean, it's obviously unique in its specific combination, but a lot of the things I believe are already around somehow. I mean, the Onslaught, I believe, was something really new, at least 2003, 2004, if you count them together. And of course, Assault. I'm not sure, but was there any game that had Bombing Run or something similar out of the box?
How's it called? This game with the cars and the football.
Yeah, Bombing Run.
Yeah,
Rocket League.
yeah, Rocket League. Yeah, I feel like Bombing Run was the predecessor of
Yeah.
Rocket League.
Yeah. So maybe they were the first to do it. It's actually funny. I mean, it's basically soccer just in a shooter. I really loved it. So I would consider this unique.
I'm amazed you both didn't mention the best part of this game.
The menu.
If you look at the car, the license plate,
Oh yeah.
there isn't any game before or after it which includes license plate with your nickname if you enter the vehicle. It's so amazing.
Well, Toxic does something similar. It prints your name on your armor,
Yeah, it's true.
but not in a car, of course.
Then I couldn't really find the correct dates of the games when the patches was released, but I think UT 2004 was one of the first, if not the first, which had 64-bit support.
Could be. I mean, it was roughly around that time. Yeah.
Yeah, but it happened so fast with so many games, it's hard to find really the first one, but I looked for hours and I'm pretty sure it could be that one. Another thing, which is, I think, rare, maybe it's not unique, but could be that a development studio basically says, well, let's take everything from the previous game and give it to the new one. It's a bold move, an interesting move, and I think it worked. And of course, maybe you guys know that already. The bots are used for a kind of research. They try to make bots who are more human, and for a lot of that research they used the bot system from UT 2004. It's really unique that science is using a game for something like that.
And that's what's so nuts about them. They really feel kind of natural. If you compare it with Elite Force, for example, or the Quake engine, you know those are bots when you see them playing. And in UT, I believe it's really a little bit more difficult to spot it. If you have a look at the list and see, well, ping 0, okay, that's probably a bot. But from the gameplay, depending on level, it's not necessarily easily to spot if this is a bot or an actual human player.
Yeah, and they insult you just as a human player would.
Yeah, at least they don't call hacks.
Who does something like that? Nobody. Yo, then the next important question. What would you guys say? What could a new sequel do better? Of course, we all want new graphics, new netcode, everything. But what are the core features you would like to see in a new Unreal Tournament game?
You're talking literally, as in what is the most important?
In general.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll go first. Some new modes. Sounds strange. I know the game already has a lot of them. But for example, if you look at the open source game Nexus, this has a mode that's called Key Hunt. The captain knows that mode. I have shown him what this is all about. This is where you run around with multiple teams. So you don't necessarily only have 2 teams. It could be 3 or 4 teams. Every team starts out with 1 key. Every team has a key in its own color. And the goal is not to get this key somewhere, like in Capture the Flag, or to shoot a lot of guys. The goal is to get 1 player to have all the keys from all teams. And you do this is of course by fragging. If you frag someone who is carrying a key, he drops a key. If you run over the key, then you catch it. And it is also okay if in the same team 2 players have keys and they meet. This puts a whole new dynamic on this team play, because in Capture the Flag you know the map, you know what is going on, where to go, how to react, but there's a certain dynamic if there is no special spot where you have to go. It's entirely up to your team. And this is a mode I would really love to see in UT. And a return of the normal domination mode. I mean, in UT 2004 you have double domination, that's the one with the 2 spots. But in UT 99 you had domination, where there are 3 or maybe even more spots. And your tickets are counting up to a certain number. Toxic, for example, has a 2. And I think it's a little bit more interesting because again, it's more dynamic. It's not so prone to camping on a spot because there are more spots, maybe even more spots than players. And if they would bring back the normal domination mode, I would really like to see that. And well, even if they don't do it, I already mentioned Toxic. It's also Unreal 3 engine, and it really feels UT-like. And something newer would be nice. I think that's about what comes to mind, aside from the obvious, well, new graphics, of course.
I
Or
agree.
technical stuff.
The double domination change was a little bit weird, in my opinion. I also had this feeling that domination from UT1 was better, and it's also a game mode that you find in other games. Also, about the question, when you were saying what could a sequel be better in, like, to make the game better or to make it more popular, it's of course a matter of perspective. But I would say UT4 was the sequel people were waiting for, and what they did great was to keep mechanics that allow for fast-paced play. UT4 and 2K4 both had awesome movement, even though the mechanics were different. So it doesn't really matter what they choose, but as long as it's, as long as it's cool and you can have fun moving around, then you won't get bored playing the game. I feel like personally I get bored with games where moving around sucks, like, and you have to wait to meet an opponent to enjoy the game a little. Like Halo, the storyline and all that is way better than UT's on that aspect, but the movement is slow and boring, in my opinion, of course. And I know that a lot of people share that opinion. Like, for instance, games like Call of Duty, on the first aspect the movement seems limited, but if you watch the pro plays on YouTube, the game is actually so friggin' fast. And when you ask them what they like the most about the game, are going to say it's the mechanics, the fact that you can move around and do crazy stuff all around. And this is essential, in my opinion, to a successful UT. Obviously, make it more up to date in terms of concepts from a marketing point of view, and maybe, I don't know, maybe make something to follow the BR trend. Maybe incorporate a battle pass system to keep people hooked to it. Maybe sell merchandise. Like, for instance, I know that I'd love to possess a U logo necklace like the developers have on UT.
Oh yeah,
This one is awesome. I know some people even have a tattoo of the logo because it's so cool.
I
And
believe they
this
even
is,
made a trophy.
yeah, the trophy that you get when you finish the game. Like, they don't have the digital version, they have it in
Yeah.
for real.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And what makes the strength of the latest games is they have continuous support, and they hear the community when they complain about some weapons being too strong or some mechanics being bad for some reasons. They are going to patch it, and in the next version it's gonna be slightly different, and it makes the game interesting. Like BRs, they release new maps every year. They do stuff like that makes you want to keep playing the game, And last but not least, to make it more accessible to casual players and to the new generation. So I'm not sure if I believe in this, but the aim assist with controllers, at first I would say it's a terrible idea, but you are forced to witness today that a majority of players, they just want to come home and sit on their couch and play with their controllers, and they represent a big proportion of players. And of course, crossplay without aim assist is not possible, and there must be a way to have something that is balanced. I know they have been able to get some stats out of players' performance in Halo, and they could identify average accuracies for casual players and for pro players. And in Halo, for instance, it is more interesting to have a controller, because aim assist is so strong that no matter how skilled you are, you'll be better with a controller in Halo, at least. And with a more balanced system, with a new UT, maybe that could work I know in UT3 some guy played with a controller and it was excellent. So today with some aim assist, it's possible for this community to play well. And maybe what made Fortnite success, for instance, is the fact that it looks less violent than UT. So it's more acceptable for children and the younger generation. Today, you know, we have to realize that the biggest player base is basically ranges basically from 12 to 25. So the kids today start very early, and I remember being almost the only kid under 15 to play UT in 2005, and this is why the game was probably not as popular as Fortnite, for instance.
I of course also want to give you my insights, what I would like of a sequel. It's not only a better experience for new players, but I would really like a nice single player. Just enhance all this stuff with the arena, maybe combine it with every mode, introduce really every aspect of the game in the single player. And I also would like a kind of Counter-Strike gameplay where you have to buy your equipment, your stuff for every round, and if you lose some rounds, well, you have to go into the arena with low budget gear. It could change the dynamic of the experience totally. Other than that, I think just give me again an Onslaught gameplay, nice graphics, and I'm happy. I would play it on every LAN party again.
Some minor improvement I just came up with. I sometimes think about that. The game doesn't really tell you how many players are suitable for a certain map. In Elite Force you have this, there's something like the recommended number of players. And in UT there are some really vast maps, which are really big, and playing them with 4 players simply makes no sense. It takes ages to get anywhere, and it's just not a good gameplay this way, but you can only see this once you are on the map. This is something I believe I'm also missing. Have an idea in advance what you're getting yourself into when you open a server with a certain map.
Well, this is kind of the old problem, I would say, with all the server browsers and descriptions of game modes. Sometimes you don't have a clue what is inside. You just click on it and test it.
Yeah, but it's just such a minor thing. Elite Force did it. They told you right away, well, this map is suitable for, let's say, 4 players. And you knew what you were getting into. It doesn't cost a lot. It's just a tiny bit, but it would make sense.
Yeah, sure. It's a quick info for the new player and also the new hoster at the LAN party. You don't have to force yourself to all the stupid small maps if you have a big LAN party.
Did we have LAN pure mode? I mean, that's something that many games today do. You really need to have your computer hooked up to some network, and basically what you're doing is you're playing online, you're just doing it from the same room. A real LAN mode.
Sure, the game has of course a real LAN mode.
No, I mean what a sequel could have.
Oh, in that way.
Yeah, because today companies simply strip this away and makes you dependent on the goodwill of the companies.
It's really hard to answer. Does a new game really need a LAN mode? On the one side, you know my answer. Yes, it needs, because it needs to survive after EA is shutting down the latest success. I think that the most important feature would be direct IP.
Yeah, or that, at least that.
Yeah, the baddest thing a game can do is, or a developer can do, is having only a matchmaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in my opinion, not a bad idea to have some sort of ranking or comparison, so that you are actually able to do what we discussed earlier, to have a proper game setup where you know, well, these opponents are kind of my league, but not necessarily matchmaking.
But to answer the question, probably I would say, if you really want to look at gaming as art, and art which should survive the test of time, you would need either the direct IP or LAN mode, because every master server will be shut down, and yeah, most of the time the community nowadays can't step up because we don't have the necessary information to combat that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish for that. Okay guys, anything else, or do we move on?
So we still have the Easter egg segment.
which will be just a quick talk.
No, it's okay. Just wanted to know. And one question out of the blue, maybe later.
Concerning the hidden features, I would say you have so many invisible doors in walls that are hidden in many maps. For example, Curse War. You have the double damage, which is hidden in the wall. You have the magic shield as well, and you open them and shooting on them. There is a giant dildo actually, which is hidden in a DM Rajigar somewhere. I think developers had quite a bit of fun with this one. So if you look closely, the Redeemer has a Swallow Beast mansion written on it. There's a character, the Gorge fan from the cinematic, that is strapped down in the hole in the middle of the map called Gale. And I believe you can find him also in an unslogged map. And there are so many other Easter eggs which I'm forgetting. And I know, for instance, that in older versions of UT, they had like a picture of one of the developers which was hidden somewhere, and to open that room, you had to shoot like different lamps in the game in a certain order, and then eventually you would have this room open for you, and you'd see the picture of the developer, and you would die if you entered the room. So the game has quite a few fun stuff like this.
Yeah, I was also very surprised how many stuff there is hidden. Two favorite things: if you play with the player name Cliff B, the entire bot team will be named after the team Epic, so the developers. Or if you conquer the single player campaign as Mr. Crow, you will unlock a vehicle which is basically a driving toilet. It's the fun I like.
Yeah, and there are, of course, the more obvious ones. Like, for example, this was quite a surprise back then. When you set everything to maximum with the graphics settings, the game tells you, holy shit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the first time I hear that, I was, what the hell? Is this really happening?
Yeah, and of course, back then, when the game was fairly new, it was not quite obvious, because most people who had a normal computer, so to say, would never hit this. And after 2 years or something like that, you get a new computer and you do what you do always. You run everything to max, and holy shit.
And they even translated that.
Yeah, actually they did. And I think also the announcements are sometimes interesting. For example, I only recently looked it up what it actually says when I hear lag monkey. I always heard it and thought, what the fuck is he meaning by lag monkey? Well, it's not lag monkey. If you do 15 kills with the flag gun in a row, it's the flag monkey. And I always thought it has something to do with laggy gameplay or something like that. But there are quite a number of announcements in this game.
Yeah, you have that for headshots and shock combos also, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, since we are nearly at 2 hours 30 in the stream, I would say we close it off a little bit earlier.
I have one question left. I'm not sure if this is just my observation or if it is actually really a thing. At least when I play on my server, I can set, of course, the difficulty of the bots. And something I noticed over the years is that the bots play, at least in my opinion, significantly better with the same difficulty level when they play Onslaught in comparison to all the other modes. Do you have any idea what is going on there? Is it just in my imagination, or are we just playing so bad as a team? Because they really feel as if you had set the level one step up, as long as you play Onslaught.
That's a good observation, actually. I never really noticed it. Maybe when I noticed in single action, even if you set like a certain level, you will see the improvements with bots throughout the entire campaign session. But what you're talking about is even online, when you're setting your own server and you're spawning bots into your server.
Yeah, exactly. If you fill them up, for example, you try to play against humans against bots, and at least in my opinion, it's significant that the bots play a lot better on Onslaught maps. At least in my opinion. I'm not sure if this is just a crazy thing, but it really feels so every time.
It could be the vehicles actually, but maybe you've seen that on foot too. I don't know, but it could be true actually. I don't have the answer to that question, to be fair.
All right.
Well, then I would say this is the part of the video where we open the mic to you. Are there any topics left, anything on your mind we have missed?
One aspect also that UT had on all old games, basically, that the newest one don't have, is the fact that you and myself, we could decide to host a server, and nowadays it's everything is hosted on a master server, and it kills the customization possibilities, right? And this is what made UT awesome, in my opinion. And as I was saying in the beginning of the video, it's that the community could add such an input on content creation, and the fact that they came up with things like trials, ballistics, or a killing floor, and so many mods that came in addition to the 10 original mods, are another aspect of the game that made it quite awesome. So you'd have, like with trials, you'd literally play Trackman and Nations within UT. So you had a game within a game, literally. And that's the same with invasion RPGs, where you face monsters which get significantly better at each wave. And yeah, that's things that you can't find with modern games anymore.
Yeah, if you cater to the community, to the modders and everything, you can keep a game alive for such a long time. So many companies showed it again and again that, well, the sale numbers can go up even years after the original release. But since we talked now really for a long time, if it's okay with you, I would close it off.
It's okay. I've said everything I had to.
Well, then I would say that's it for this review. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.